Welcome to another edition of Hey Bobby, brought to you by NECA-IBEW. It's with the Vice President of the Cleveland Indians, my good friend Bobby DiBiasio, with us on WAKR. And Bobby, this week we honor with the unveiling of the statue in Little Italy. I know one of your all-time favorite players, Rocky Colavito. So I thought we could spend some time this week on the show and talk about Rocky, the player, the Cleveland Indian icon, how so many people grew up really idolizing Rocky. I know you know him very well, and maybe talk to us a little bit about the person himself. So why don't we go that direction, my friend? Talk about Rocky Colavito.
Well, always fun to talk about Rock. He's, as you said, a generational hero, a generational icon. Um, for those of us that grew up in that era, he was Cleveland Indians baseball. And six-time All-Star, three times with the Tribe, spent 14 years in the big leagues. He played for six different teams, actually, but 8 years of those 14 were with the Cleveland Indians. He had 374 homers, one of the prolific home run hitters of his day. Rarely missed a ball game. He was a guy that conditioning really was something very important to him, and we'll talk about that in a second. He led the league in homers one year. He led the league in ribbies one year. Led the league in games played a number of years. Just a remarkable man. One time, Ray, I asked Cy Bynack just to give me a personal recollection of Rocky from him being the clubhouse guy. Cy Bynack was our clubhouse man for 45 years. And during that period of time, late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, obviously. And he said he was a perfectionist. And I knew that just from having dealt with him on different issues. An absolute perfectionist. His locker was not messy. His locker in the clubhouse was as clean and pristine, and everything was in its place. And that's how he looked as a ball player. Looked awesome in a uniform.
Bobby, obviously you can expand here, but in listening to interviews with him, he seems like he was an incredible, humble professional athlete. I thought maybe you could talk about that and talk about when he was traded from the Cleveland Indians as well.
Yeah, remarkably humble man. He never really, he actually hates the word generational hero. When I use it, he's okay if we want to say icon, but he doesn't like that word either. But Mark Summer, who is actually a reporter for the Buffalo News, was the guy that wrote the terrific book with the perfect title, Cleveland's Iconic Slugger, which actually got us to where we are with the statue. He, again, one of the most humble, kind-hearted, hard-nosed, competitive, took his craft so serious. You know, he grew up, Ray, in the Bronx, and in 1933, he got into baseball, as most young people do, because their older brothers were into baseball. And his brothers, Dominic and Vito, allowed a young Rocky to tag along at the park. And just a couple blocks from their home, there was a park called Crotona Park, had 5 baseball diamonds on it. And they were there. The Colavito boys were there every day. And that's how he learned the game of baseball. Crotona Park, kids might have been his first home instead of the home in which he lived in. But it's funny, as generations change, neighborhoods change. Another Indian slugger came out of Crotona Park, a young man by the name of Manny Ramirez. As the neighborhood shifted from a predominant Italian neighborhood to a Hispanic neighborhood. And So that's an interesting connection in our world, that Rocky and Manny came from the same sandlot to do wonderful things for the Cleveland Indians.
Was he devastated, Bobby, when he was traded from the Indians, or was it business? Take it to that time, because it was devastating for you and many Cleveland Indians fans. But talk about that time of his life.
I remember my mother crying. I was 4 or 5 years old at the time. Spring training was ending. Last day of spring training, I believe. He had just got a base hit or a walk or something, and the manager came out to shake his hand. And I think it was a hit. And he's like, why would the manager come out to take me out of a game, a exhibition game, and shook his hand and said, that's the last hit you'll get in a Cleveland Indians uniform. You've just been traded to the Detroit Tigers. And his best friend on the team was Herbie Score. And he tells the story, and Herbie tells the story about how Herbie almost quit that day. Said, I'm not going back home with Cleveland. Oddly, the Indians were opening up the season at home against Detroit. And so Rocky was on our plane going home and going to the other side of the dugout. It was such a weird thing that Frank Lane, who to this day, the general manager who traded him, he has an absolute disdain. When we had the celebration, statue celebration happened to fall yesterday on Rocky's 88th birthday. And he was as angry and hated Frank Lane on his 88th birthday as he did when he was a youngster in a big league uniform.
We're talking with Bobby DiBiasio. Hey, Bobby, VP with the Cleveland Indians, brought to you by NECA-IBEW. A couple years ago, Bobby, you did the sit-down conversation with Rocky up at Playhouse Square, and I know that was well received. Talk about how the celebration this week maybe came together with the unveiling of the statue and everything. A lot of work has been laid to get this done, and maybe talk about the timeline, how it all came together.
Yeah, we have to go back, turn the calendar back, Ray, to January of 2017. If people remember January of 2017, we were still bummed out about losing Game 7 in extra innings of the 2016 World Series just a couple months prior. But as we always do, we look forward to the next season with hope and faith. And I get a phone call sitting in my office from this Buffalo reporter from the Buffalo News, and Mark Summer is his name. And he tells me he's going to write a book about Rocky, and was wondering if he could come to Cleveland and sit in my office and sit and chat. And we did. And Mark and Rocky ended up connecting. And as I mentioned earlier, the terrific book with that perfect title, the Cleveland's iconic slugger, came to pass. So a lot of writers would have been happy just writing a book. But Mark thought, let's do something a little bit more special, because this man is special. So let's have an evening with Rocky Colavito at Playhouse Square, which I had the honor and privilege of being the master of ceremonies of. And it was me and Rocky on stage just telling stories and having a blast. And then he was joined by Sam McDowell and Louis Tiant, Vern Fuller. And we just had a terrific time telling stories. And a lady who was in the audience at that time, Ida Pochi, grew up idolizing, loving Rocky, really started the push for a statue. And then when we had the difficult discussions with her about the criteria and standards, et cetera, for a statue outside a Progressive Field, are really reserved for gentlemen who have been enshrined in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, that they're in Cooperstown, that there has to be levels of retired uniform numbers have criteria, statues have criteria. Membership in the Indians Hall of Fame certainly has criteria, of which Rocky is certainly a member. And Ida began the process of wondering, how do we do this? And we ended up being a real strong committee. And went to some leaders of the Little Italy neighborhood in Cleveland, on the east side of Cleveland, and Tony Brush Park. Tony Brush was the boxing name for Tony Brescia, one of the great boxers of his era that came out of that neighborhood. And so we worked towards the end of getting a statue for Rocky in Little Italy, and just a tremendous salute to, again, a generational icon.
Rocky Colavito. Now we can all enjoy the statue of Rocky in Little Italy. Bobby DiBiasio. Hey, Bobby, the VP of the Cleveland Indians. He takes time to join us each week here at WAKR. My friend, thanks for the stories of Rocky, and we'll reconnect next week with another edition of Hey, Bobby.
Well, thanks, Ray. And also, if you haven't read the book, Cleveland's Iconic Slugger, please do so. If you're a Rocky fan, Indians fan of that period, Mark Summer did a terrific job. Thank you, Ray. Take care, sir.